Morning, everyone. We're going to start in just a minute. I know we still have people coming in, so we'll let everybody get in. So we have Scott and John here today going to talk about waiting and ownership, why staffing problems keep coming back. And I'll do some quick introductions. So John Dickerson has been an advocate for change his entire life, helping design the first Medicaid waivers in Indiana, helping people transition from state institutions and ICFs, developing solutions to the waiting list, and supporting families with IDD. He began his career with the ARC of South Dakota in 1973, and he was with the ARC of Indiana from 1974 to 79, and then at the ARC US from 79 to 83, and then returned to the ARC of Indiana. So we are very delighted to have him with us. And we also have Scott DeFacilli, the co-founder and innovative DSP Magnet Programs. He's revolutionized how programs tackle direct support professional shortages and overtime costs. His methods have led to remarkable successes, including helping one provider save over $750,000 in overtime annually. So with that, I'm going to open it up to them, and we are going to ask everyone put questions in the chat, and then we will open it up for Q&A near the end.
Thanks so much, Nina. Quick favor to ask of everyone, if you can, please, can we see those smiling faces? Turn those web cameras on if they're cooperating along with Zoom today. No judgment if it's a bad hair day, you got a sick kid in the background or a pet. Please, we love seeing those smiling faces. Thanks, Janet. Good to see you, Vivian. Hi, Susan. Thanks so much. Yeah. All right. Also, the cameras will really make the following question a lot easier for John and I. John and I are just kind of curious, first and foremost, about all of you here with us today. Thanks, Marilyn, for turning on the camera. All right. So, quick show of hands. Who here sits in the seat of being CEO, executive director, president, top of, okay, cool. We got a couple. All right. How about person kind of second in command, COO, vice president of something or other? Got a few people from second in command. All right. How about our human resources crowd? Where are the HR people at? Okay, awesome. Beth Ann, thanks for being here. A couple others. All right. And then frontline supervisors. And maybe the final lingering crowd of, hey, Scott, hey, John, I was just voluntold for this thing. Boss said it sounded interesting. They registered me for it. And I was like, yeah, cool. Love nothing more than another online meeting in my day, right? Okay. So, question John and I want to open up with is this. Think quietly. You don't have to put anything in chat. You don't have to put anything in chat. If nothing changes, will you still be dealing with staffing challenges, headaches, and firefighting a year from now? Okay. I see some of those uncomfortable chuckles and smiles. All right. That's why we're here. Look, the truth is staffing problems don't persist because all of you don't care. That couldn't be further from the truth. They persist because ownership gets delegated and leaders wait. So let's talk about that. As Dina mentioned, we're here to talk about this concept of waiting versus ownership. And the best way that I can illustrate this for you is to share a short story. So 3 years ago, I was presenting at a provider conference, all providers just like you. Same challenges, same limitations, same pressures. And there were two different leaders that I met there. Now, the first leader, after the presentation, they agreed that obviously this stuff really matters, that they wanted to take a different approach, and then they delegated it to human resources. Everyone had really good intentions, but nothing really changed. Fast forward 3 years later, the staffing problem hadn't gone away. It had compounded, in fact. And the nature of the compounding started landing things on the COO's desk personally. And that's when ownership finally shifted. Now, the other leader from a different organization at that same conference 3 years ago, they owned it immediately. They did not wait for perfect timing or perfect answers. And I can tell you like a whole story on all the reasons why now wasn't a perfect time. But they didn't let that get in their way. 3 years later, they're still not perfect, but they are in a very different place. Far fewer emergencies, drastically less overtime, and more stability. So, same moment, same constraints, same limitations, same workforce crisis. The difference was not effort, it was ownership. Waiting feels responsible until you realize how expensive it's become. So, let me share my screen here. Got a question for everybody. Real simple. Let's see some answers here. So, on this concept of waiting versus ownership, what I just hit on, what do you see around you? Just type one word in chat, waiting or owning. Which best describes how this is handled right now?
This is not a quiz. It won't be published or shared with anyone. It's just
Yeah,
your perception within your organization that'll help us as we begin thinking about this and talk about it with you.
yeah, thanks for sharing that, John. I realize everybody here is in Florida except for John and myself. This is where I always like to say, this is Vegas. Vegas rules apply. What's said here stays here.
That's right.
Waiting, waiting, waiting. Got an owning or two. Good. Yeah, there's a lot of waiting out there. I appreciate the candor and the answers. Thanks so much. This is really helpful. So, yeah, go for it, John.
Oh, and I was just wanting to amplify as people are adding in their answers. Something Scott said, I just want to come back to. Um, each of you works hard on this. It's not a question of effort. And we are here to explore with you as opposed to uh, telling you everything to do. You're key because you're here. You were here because you want to not be in that same place a year from now, we hope. So thanks. And thank you for sharing where you're at in this.
So, absolutely. So, let me walk you through a very simple model to help reveal some things that are likely getting in your way and that you're experiencing, especially for those of you that are in an environment where waiting describes how it's being handled. So, here's a simplified landscape of what John and I both see with providers across the United States. At the first level is what I call competing with everyone. This is like the tried and true script that you hear everywhere, like you've thought, heard, or said it at one point in your career. We're competing with McDonald's and Amazon and Target and Home Depot and our local grocery store. The pay is about the same, but here you have to be responsible for someone's life. It's factually true. But it's the tip of the iceberg. What we see in organizations like this is they focus and dwell on all the limitations, all the reasons why they can't do certain things, all the reasons why they don't have enough time, enough resources, enough this, enough that. They dwell and focus entirely on their limitations. So unfortunately, nothing changes. They remain trapped on what I call the hamster wheel. Vicious cycle of recruiting, hiring, hoping for the best, and then they go out the door and around you go. Now, level two is significantly different. This is what I characterize as the promise does not equal the experience. Let me unpack that for you. This is, and I'm sure you've all seen it, a situation where you recruit a new direct support professional and you're excited about them. And they're excited about you, and you're hearing good feedback from your hiring managers and others, like, we're excited to add this person to the team. But often there's that moment where you kind of cross your fingers and hope that they go somewhere that's going to be a good fit. Maybe they get placed in an area where candidly, the supervisor, rightfully so, is burned out and jaded from working long hours and seeing the revolving door of staff, or maybe the directors, in that same place, or maybe it has really great supervision, but just some of the clients there have some challenging behaviors lately, and this person is brand new, and you're like, they've never seen some of these behaviors before. How are they going to react? Like, I don't know that this is going to work out like for them the way we want. That the initial promise and hope and potential that we all see there does not always equal their firsthand experience once they get through onboarding, orientation, and training. What we have going on here in these organizations is we have silos of good and bad. We always talk about silos, yet none of us are running, farming and agricultural businesses. And often when we dig down a layer deeper and look into these silos of good and bad, these pockets where some amazing things are happening and pockets where you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to this location. Oh boy, hope this works out. Oftentimes we're waiting. We're waiting for things to get better or things to resolve. We're like, well, that supervisor that's really burned out and jaded, she's normally not like that. I know things have been rough on her. I don't want to make things harder. Like, I don't really want to have a tough conversation with her. I'll wait. Maybe things will get better in like a couple of weeks. It's that waiting. And all too often, the result of all this is burnout. Burnout for the long term, great existing staff. They get jaded by that revolving door. And it's burnout real quickly for that new DSP who was like, oh my gosh, I was so excited about this coming in. And then I got here and oh my gosh, I can't believe what happened. It's tough. Then the third level up from that is what we characterize as respected organizations. Now, obviously, this is a good thing, and there are a lot of good things going on here. And at the highest level, what's going on is there's fundamentally great teamwork. People are taking action on things. Oftentimes, things are being delegated, and sometimes in that process of delegation, you've all seen it and experienced it, things get lost in translation, slip through the cracks, misinterpreted, deprioritized, those metaphorical fires pop up and we go into firefighter mode and we get sidetracked. But overall, big picture, we have great teamwork, but things are slipping through the cracks and nobody's taking ownership of those things that are slipping through the cracks and has that big picture in mind. And this is why, it's so hard to see those things that slip through the cracks. This is why we're often left feeling confused, like, John, Scott, like, we're a respected organization. We're doing some really good things. I don't know what's going on. It's still so tough to find and keep good people. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. I had $1 for every time I'd heard that. And then at the fourth and highest level, where so many want to be, the phrase John and I have heard over the years is, we want to be the employer of choice. We want people to know about us and desire to work here. And what's going on here is something different and unique. There's ownership that's been taken and innovation is happening. They're doing something fundamentally different. And because of that, they become magnetic. They magnetically attract great people, whether it's people supported or staff. Both are desirable, and they're magnetically drawn to your organization. And then just like a magnet, they stick. They stay there. So thinking through those levels, next question for you in chat. Type the level you do not want to still be stuck at 6 months from now. Is it that level 1 where we're competing with everyone? Is it level 2 where we've got those silos and the promise does not equal the experience? Or is it we don't want to be stuck at level 3? Like, yeah, it's a good thing we're a respected organization, but there's still something missing. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Regina. Sharon, thank you. Appreciate the candor. So that's very high level breakdown. But John, let me kick it over to you because I always love your stories of how this really looks and feels for everyone in this field.
Thanks, Scott. And it's such a great pyramid to look at and define both where you don't want to be stuck at and where you want to be. And one of the things that always gets in the way as we begin talking about is, well, what is our resources? How are we going to work on this? Where does the money come from? I was talking with one of our clients the other day, and they've got about a 30% to 40% turnover rate. They don't lose 40% of their staff. They lose 20% of them constantly churning. And I asked the person that said she was in charge of this, I said, what's your budget for recruitment, retention, training? And she said, well, I really don't have one. And I said, have you ever figured out the cost of turnover? Well, no, not really. It's a lot. So let me just give you a little math real quick. Two numbers that are tossed around a lot in our field, I think they're actually both low, is one, the cost of replacing someone ranges from about $4,500 per person to $6,500 per person. And that includes recruitment time, screening, training, overtime, and lost revenue. I was down in Florida in October and people were talking about a bunch of folks coming off the waiting list, and people said, we're not going to be able to take people because we don't have staff. That's lost revenue. So if you have 30 open slots on your staffing table, the low end, that's going to be about $157,000 a year. At the high end, it's going to be almost $200,000 a year. But we don't put that in our financials to say this is the cost of turnover that we're doing. If you have 80 people, and you can do the math yourself, you have 80 people, it's going to be between $360,000 a year to $520,000 a year, but it becomes invisible. And I first had a CFO that challenged me on that. Oh, it doesn't cost anywhere near that. And I said, well, let's just take out a pencil and start talking about this. And he said, oh my God, you're on the low side of what it's costing us. And so the idea of there is an impact, there's also the impact on the people we support. We have a short video that is a true story of a young man who talked about turnover in his life. And he blamed himself because staff are quitting. And he said to me, John, it hurts me so much to have all these people come into my life that I've done something that they want to quit. That now I don't learn their name until they've been with me for 6 months. And as a result, I don't learn many people's names. He wants to learn people's name. He wants to be close to people, but he feels there's this revolving door. So as we think about that, keep in mind there's a real cost to turnover and what that means. The other thing I'd like you to think about just for a moment, and picture in your mind's eye the best new DSP you hired in the last year. Who's the best one that you hired? Think about that person for a moment. I always ask people when they just had a class, pick your future superstars in that class. Because you get back to Scott's pyramid, if you're aiming for the top, you want everybody to be a potential superstar in there. If you're in that bottom rung where you're just competing with everyone, it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling that you're going to get some people you really don't want. So I asked this to a group of folks one time, and they said, Molly's the best person we've hired in years. And I said, do you think she knows that? Do you think she knows? Oh, of course. We're always telling her how good she is. And I said, why don't we call Molly up right now? HR director was there and got her on her cell phone. And I said, Molly, we're here with some of the leadership team. And they just told me they thought you were the best person we've ever hired. And she started crying. She literally started crying. She said, I didn't think anybody even noticed what I was doing. So think about the perceptions. They're saying she's the best person they've hired. She didn't think anybody was noticing her along the way. And think about that within your organization. As we focus so much on the people leaving, we many times forget the people that are staying and the stars they are. So we want to come back to that in the Q&A section as we start thinking about this as a solvable problem. This is not something we have to live with. It's not something we have to accept. So I'm going to toss it back to Scott here now. So,
John, thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, I love the last story. I mean, what jumps out at me is, and don't get me wrong, this is a good thing. Like DSP Appreciation Week is a very good thing. However, I think what both you and I have seen is it can be all too easy, just human nature, to fall back and default to, well, like, she knows it. She knows that she's really appreciated here. Or like, we'll wait until some event like her work anniversary, her birthday, DSP Appreciation Week. We'll wait until some event to like remind her that, hey, you're really great. And the analogy I often use with people is it's kind of like if the only time my wife heard the words "I love you" or that I showed that I loved her was on our anniversary once a year, I would not still be married here almost 15 years later.
Scott, that is such a great analogy, and I, for one, have been in a lot of places and a lot of annual dinners where we gave out DSP of the Year or Employee of the Year. I actually hate those. I truly hate them. Because if you have 100 employees and you pick one, that means you have 99 losers. And I was at an organization that had walls filled of little baseball card pictures of DSPs of the month. And I asked them, how many of those people are still with you? And the person leading me around had started as a DSP. And I said, gee, you're now the COO. Did you ever get Employee of the Month? He said, no, our boss didn't believe in it, so never submitted anybody. Find the people every day that you want to thank and recognize, because that story of Molly, she's got growth potential within the organization. But she's also got the potential to leave if she doesn't think anybody is recognizing her. And a certificate once a year isn't enough. Another reason I hate Employees Year is a very large organization, 1,000 employees. They gave their Employee of the Year at their banquet in front of 500 people. And you know what they said about her when they introduced her? This is Karen. I happen to know Karen. Name's changed. I won't tell you the organization. They said, Karen is one of our best DSPs. She was creative, caring, compassionate, always innovating to be person-centered with the two guys she worked with. But when they introduced her to all of the leaders in the community, they said, Karen never complains about working 2 shifts in a row. So as we think about this and the appreciation, just want to drive that home again, that you have great people. How do we share that with them and think about that? Scott?
Love it. Yeah, and I think that highlights that, this waiting versus ownership is a big picture concept, but there are also little moments and little opportunities where we can take ownership. We don't have to go through layers of approval to go and say, hey, just one-on-one, Karen, you're a phenomenal DSP. We appreciate you so much. We don't have to wait until that big dinner and then, yeah, highlight that we really appreciate you because you don't complain about, taking on an extra shift or 2 or 3 or 4. Yeah. It's a challenge. So to be clear, this isn't, which all of you already know, this isn't a motivation or a software problem or any of those things or a lack of caring. It's a problem with clarity and clearly defining, okay, who owns this? Yes, all of us are involved in the culture, the atmosphere, the retention of staff. This is an everybody thing. If you're in HR, this is like, yes, this certainly involves you, but you can't solve it all by yourself. It's not like, oh, hey, sure thing, boss, I'll take care of this workforce crisis. What do you want me to do next week? Like solve world peace or world hunger? It just doesn't work that way. Yes, it involves you, but there has to be this higher level of ownership to see things through so things don't fall through the cracks. This is not a motivation or a caring problem. This is a leadership and ownership thing. and that clarity around that. So, John, can you talk a little bit about, what you see and the work you do with leaders to help facilitate some connections, across organizations? Because the reality is that I highlighted earlier, like, yeah, no matter what, we have these silos, all these different locations, different shifts, different people spread out. Um, and ownership is a challenge given the reality that all of you face.
Scott's a really great question. One of the things we often ask people is, and just you think about it and put it in the chat. What were the last 3 messages you had from a supervisor? Were they positive? Were they neutral? Or were they negative? We asked that of DSPs. And then we asked them, how did that communication happen? Was it by phone, by text, by email, or sitting face to face with someone? So one of the things we heard is that more than half the time the communication with their supervisor was when something was negative, something went wrong. And it often happened by text or phone. Rarely could we have time to sit and talk with someone. So with Quillo, we focus on storytelling and positive storytelling with short videos. And we often ask leaders that, so again, I'll just jump on here. Janet, say for example, you had a chance to have a cup of coffee with someone, and it just so happened it was 2 days before they were going to think about quitting. And you had a minute to 2 to talk to them about why they're so valuable to your organization. That might keep them from leaving. So with Quillo, we're all about telling stories, introducing leadership, and thinking about what do you want to say to people that is positive and builds up the culture of the organization. One thing Scott's told me in the years, and Scott and I have known, what is it now, 5 years or so we've been working together, Scott? Stumbling across each other? Or is it longer than that?
It's longer. It doesn't seem like it, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're pushing 7 or 8 now.
It could be. But the idea that the importance of building a culture, and culture isn't the words you paint on the wall or the brochure you put or what you put in your strategic plan. It's how you treat people every day and what you say to them. So at Quillo, we're all about building culture with storytelling and communicating by video. And that is important because we always talk about there's 3 things we want to ask you to do. Think about how you want your staff to feel. What do you want them to know, and what do you want them to do? And that feeling is so important, that they feel that it's so key. Janet, thank you. You put in there, saying there, for always thank you for doing a good job and taking the initiative, not waiting to be asked to do something. Wonderful. And how do we begin doing that throughout the organization when we're pressed with so many things that are timely there? And those are the things that we start doing and creating habits. And how do we build that culture over and over again? And it's something the experts will tell you, it takes years to build an inclusive and positive culture. You can tear it apart in about 30 minutes. And so we often ask leaders, how much time do you spend on the culture of your organization? The usual answer is not enough. My answer back to them is, it's every minute of every day. It's how you greet people, the memos you send around, the policies that you do. How do you make it so that people feel, we often say, we want them to feel they belong there with your organization, and that means they're meant to be there, and they belong there because they're wanted to be there. So those are just something to think about in the culture that you're building from the day you start onboarding to the day you get ready for somebody that retires that's been with you for 35 years. Scott, let's go back to that question of ownership then and waiting.
Yeah. And I think, John, what you reminded me of is I was just talking with the CEO from this provider yesterday, in fact. But along the lines of what you were saying with nurturing the culture, it's an all the time thing. It's every day, every interaction. One idea that they came up with about a year and a half ago, and they didn't wait. They were just like, "We're going to do it." And in fact, one of the frontline supervisors took it and ran with it. Um, was that they were going to have Thankful Thursdays rather than waiting for like a birthday, a work anniversary, DSP Appreciation Week. Each and every week on Thursday, their leadership team would get together, you know, attach it to a team meeting and have like 20 minutes to sit around and write handwritten thank you notes to people. And it started with a frontline supervisor taking ownership of that and pushing it forward and getting the support of the CEO and a couple others involved to regularly nurture the culture, call people out for the amazing things that they've done. So, you know, certainly an idea that any of you could take and use, but I just want to be clear. Yeah, DSP Magnet, it's not about just giving you more ideas. Most leaders that John and I meet and get to talk with, and we'll open up for questions here in a moment. Most leaders I notice, you already have a long list of things you know would help and good ideas. And right now, the barrier to that is you're stuck in constant firefighting mode or waiting for that phone call of one more thing like that's going to hit you today or this week. So we help leaders stop waiting, move the right priorities from that long list to the top, and follow through on those great ideas they already have without crushing your already exhausted team of people around you. So if staffing keeps landing on your desk and you don't have another option that will really work, you know, that's what DSP Magnet is here to support people like you with. So to be clear, you know, we're going to open up for questions, but I know this is a large group forum. So I just want to put this offer out there. You know, John and I are always, we're just offering a conversation. We're always happy to talk because the reality is the workforce crisis that we always talk about in like big picture terms, because apparently that's a fun thing to do when we get together and we hang out like this. It impacts everyone differently. There are all these big, scary things attached to it, and they're all true, but they impact every provider differently in a unique way. So we're happy to have a conversation. If you're in waiting mode, you know, reach out when you're ready. These things work when someone is ready to own it. And unfortunately, you know, we're all closer to waiting than any of us want to admit. So if you feel most comfortable reaching out privately, shoot John or myself an email with just the word ownership. And here's our contact info. So seriously, if you're in a place we're ready to own things, do something different, and just want some outside perspective, John and I are both always happy to have a conversation. Shoot us an email. Just type one word, ownership. Or heck, that phone number on screen is, you can text me. So,
Got a couple things in the chat, Scott.
okay.
Morgan, you've tried a lot of different things to keep our staff, team building, gift cards. People just never stay very long. The pay can offer is just not enough, no matter what we offer. And pay is really important. You know, one of the things that we did with a series of focus groups with staff, and we asked specifically for people that have been there at least a year. And we know that first 30, 60, 90 days is really key to people, and get into that. But one of the things that we learned from our focus group, we had one on the East Coast, one in the Midwest, and one in Chicago. We asked for people that have been there at least a year, 5 years, and some longer than 10 years. Because a lot of people research, why do people leave? We wanted to know why they stayed. And I would suggest you do that with some of your own people. And ranged from very large organizations to very small ones, very urban to very rural. The number one reason people said they stayed is they loved the work they did and the people they worked with and the help they made in people's lives. Nobody said they stayed because of the pay. They all said it would be better if they were able to be paid more, but others took a second job sometimes to be able to do it. But they loved the people that were working. So one of the things I'd suggest is you go talk to some of your folks and begin listening to them. They also had some great suggestions on recruiting. That one of the things they said that they felt we had such high turnover is sometimes we were hiring the wrong people. And they wish they had input into some of the interviews, that some of your best DSPs could help you in the interview process and say, boy, this person really looks like they got it, they get it. And so that question of pay is absolutely essential. Go back and look at the cost of turnover, and maybe you have some resources there to use to address pay for everybody in the system. Scott, do you want to touch on that question of pay?
What I want to touch on is what you just highlighted. I'm going to connect the dots. Can't help myself. You said that dynamic of like the exit interviews and finding out why people left versus, all right, let's find out why they stayed. This is waiting and ownership perfectly illustrated. Exit interviews, we are waiting for the person to leave. And the analogy I always like to use is it's like an autopsy. But unlike an autopsy, the patient can actually lie in this case. It's real easy to look you in the eyes, Marilyn, and go, you know, I love the work. I love the people. You're a great boss. But just the pay. And you're going to go, no, Scott, I hear you. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do more. It's the easy out. It's a lot harder for me to be brutally honest and be like, look, my supervisor once upon a time, she was great. She's burned out. She's jaded. She's become a real jerk. She's miserable to work around. That's hard to say because you're burning bridges as you go out the door. So people are not incentivized to be honest in exit interviews, and it's too little too late. Finding out why they stay is taking ownership. It's being proactive rather than reactive. It's preventative medicine versus an autopsy, to use that analogy again here. To proactively go to them, talk to them, hey, what are some of the reasons you love being here? What makes you stay? You know, as I always like to joke, clearly it's not because this is easy work, you're going to get rich doing it, and oh, added bonus, you just love documentation, right? Pay is absolutely important, but people will make all sorts of decisions, emotional decisions, to justify sometimes the irrational. And John, you hit it on the head. You know, some of the DSPs where it's like the pay leads to struggles, understandably so, and they take a second job to keep doing this when they could just as easily go, it's time for me. I got to do something else entirely different. I can't continue doing this. And I've often seen DSPs where I'm like, they tell me the pay is a legitimate barrier, and they're like, I have a second job. And I'll ask, okay, so what's your second job? Oh, well, I'm also a DSP at another provider. So people make all sorts of irrational decisions, but if we're waiting for these exit interviews, it's too little too late. So let's take some more ownership and find out why they stay.
Janet had a great thing in the comment in the chat, Scott. She said, I think it's important as a supervisor to ask, how can I help you? You know, I think that's true for everybody in the organization. How can we make your work easier? What can we do? People want to be listened to, and that's a really great point, Janet. The other one that was in the chat is from Robin, letting your staff know that you're willing to help whenever needed, even helping in the restroom if needed. This idea of, what am I going to do to help my staff? I was visiting, looking at a hospital has incredibly high turnover for their housekeeping staff, sometimes as high as 80%. These are people that are cleaning the hospital rooms. And I found a fellow and went and visited him. So a young guy ran the housekeeping staff. He had gotten it down to 11%. And we were just walking he spent 14 minutes of every hour in his office. He said, if I'm in my office, I'm not out with my staff. So he had a little egg timer. When 14 minutes went off, he went on a walk around the hospital. And a lady was taking food up to her husband from the cafeteria, dropped it in the hallway. This guy's the head of housekeeping. He has like 300 people answering to him. He got down and helped her clean it up. Next thing you know, a guy magically appeared with a mop and he said, "Boss, we got this." He said, "I'm fine. Let's get it cleaned up. We'll get you another tray. I'll pay for the tray to replace what you dropped here. Let's get this to your husband." Everybody came like a team because he was out there around folks and wanted to know what he could do to help bring that together. So letting them know you're willing to help is a huge deal.
And John, I think what you just shared, I mean, more than just telling them, he showed. He
Yes.
wasn't above getting down on the floor and helping clean it up. It's powerful. It goes so far.
The other thing we've heard, Scott, from people that have worked the job, I mean, how many people in this call have worked as a DSP yourself? You've done the job. And a lot of times, as a supervisor or a leader in an organization, your DSPs don't know that you've done that job, that you've done what you're asking them to do. An organization in Arkansas we work with has 800 staff. She started as a DSP while working to college, and she's now the executive director of that organization and been with them now for 27 years. But she did every job they're asking people to do today. And letting people get to know you is so, and that you've done it, you understand this is such an important job. Any other questions in the chat that somebody would like to?
Or please unmute, jump in.
Yes.
John and I would love a little conversation. We don't need to be the only voices talking. This is where I offer the friendly reminder. Unmute is in fact in the lower left-hand corner. If you just click it and go, "Hey, Scott, hey, John, I got a question."
Looks like we have
And
a
so,
real quiet bunch
yeah,
this morning.
yes. Well, does anybody have in mind one of the best people you hired last year that is still with you and doing a great job? Somebody come to mind? One of the things I ask people sometimes, you think about that, is just on your phone, record a simple video message to them and say, "Sam, Sarah, Diamond, I just wanted to tell you, this guy asked me, this crazy guy was on a video call and he said, he said, find somebody that you think is doing a great job that we hired last year and tell them how much you mean to us." And a few people will do it. This one guy did it. We happened to be live with a very large organization. We had 30 supervisors in the room. And he did it. And he came up afterwards and she sent a video back and she was tearful, just saying, "I can't tell you how much this meant to me." And so as we find that way, another fellow, I learned from him, he has, everywhere they go, every part of their agency, every place there's where people gather, in a home, in an apartment, in the office, they declare what's called a good news bench or a good news couch. And it was, we can come talk about every problem, but we're going to sit on the good news couch and talk about something good that happened first before we jump into the problem. Morgan, I feel like I help the staff as much as I possibly can. I own the agency, work in the consignment homes, also do all the training. I have a live-in staff that's been with me for about a year, and she says she likes her job. It'll be easier without all the documentation. Takes away from being with the client. Number one complaint people have is all the documentation. One of the things from my years of lobbying and looking at this is I'm always accused of being an optimist. We're in a time of great change, and some would say cataclysmic change. This is also a time for us to say, here's what we could do better if you removed some of the onerous paperwork, and be specific about that. When I was down there this fall, your new state director said, we want to work on problems collectively. We can't do 40 things at once, but we can do one or two things at once. How could you what are the documentation that you could get rid of that wouldn't affect the care that you give to people. And how could you collaborate through the arc to say, if we got rid of this much paperwork, here's what we could do better with our time with people. That's a huge one for folks. Scott?
Yeah. No surprise, I hear plenty about documentation too. And I heard someone make a different point on it the other day that I was shocked that nobody had mentioned to me more recently or often. And she was talking about that when they were really struggling with staffing, that they knew they were providing services and missing key documentation for the billing and not being reimbursed for work that they were providing. So it was a double whammy. Like you have all these openings and you these costs of turnover and overtime. And then for the people that are actually there and working, where they're tired, they're burned out, they're exhausted. So yeah, go figure. They make some mistakes. We're all human. And mistakes obviously increase when we're exhausted. So they were missing billings. It's tough and it feels like it traps us in this reactive state, and we feel like often when we're in that reactive state, I find that we're not like fully thinking and we're waiting for like, oh well, when this event passes or this gets a little bit better, when I add this one person over here, then I'll do that. Then I'll give myself permission to be proactive. And it's kind of a chicken or egg debate, and we can go round and round and round. So Morgan, I'd encourage you, is there someone that can shift some of that ownership of the documentation off of you that would actually be energized by it? Because I'll give you a question that any of you swipe. I've seen it provide powerful and sometimes shocking results with people who are engaged or totally checked out. And it's this, hey, Vivian, imagine for a moment, I've got a magic wand and I can remove one thing from your job duties and responsibilities. What would that be? That's the question. You may not always be pleased with the answer. Like, real sorry, I'll give that disclaimer up front here. But you'll find out some powerful things, most likely, and some opportunities where maybe you can shift things around for. Because often I find in every organization, there are a couple of people that are like, oh, I love documentation. I don't understand it, but there are. Thank God there are. So, Morgan, maybe that's an opportunity for you to take.
The other thing that is really interesting to begin looking at is ask them for what is the thing that bothers them the most, like Scott was talking about. And you might be surprised it's not something the state requires, it might be something you require. I was working with an agency in New York City that required physical coming into a time clock. Now imagine you're in New York City. Person that I was talking to was a job coach that worked in Harlem. He had to go down to the financial district to log in. Now that's a 35-minute subway ride, one way, that he's not paid for. Then he clocks in and then he's paid for to go back to Harlem. That was their rule. They didn't trust the software you can check in with a phone. So this was a little over a year ago. So there's to find out by asking them. Somebody said earlier, I think it was Janet, what could we do better? What is the one form they would like to get rid of as we look at it? You guys probably hear a lot about med documentation, right? Passing of meds for people. Is the state really looking at that for med errors? We need to celebrate also. Yes, we have problems sometimes when we don't document it. One of our folks did a great story where they said to staff, imagine it's somebody's taking care of your grandmother. And it's so important, it could be life or death, that she gets her meds at the right time and the right schedule. Wouldn't you want the person taking care of her to make sure? And this doctor was doing a video telling them about this and said, you and I are in the same business. We're in the business of saving lives. So getting the meds on time is important. So in Indiana, one year we had 70,000 med errors. That sounds a lot, right? 70,000 in a year. It's a big number. We started breaking that down. We have 40,000 people in our residential day programs in Indiana, 40,000. On average, they get 10 medications a day, on average. That's 14.5 million med passes a month. divide that by, or multiply that by 12. My calculator doesn't go that high, but you're going to see that 70,000 out of nearly 200 million med passes is a problem. But we get it right a whole lot of other times. So the idea of how do we praise folks while at the same time we look at that and how do they praise one another? The last thing I'll say is also how do we ask families and people with disabilities to help say thank you to their staff? Because that is such a critical issue as well. And how do we engage them and making them feel connected? One agency did something cool. They started saying, what brings you joy? So you start talking about, well, Beth Ann, what brings you joy? And Sarah, who works with Beth Ann, and they discovered in the middle of Southern Indiana, they both love sweet potato pie. We have a lot of pumpkin pie in Indiana, not so much sweet potato pie. They both came from South Georgia. Learned they grew up, different time, but they grew up about 20 miles apart. And now they're living together, working in Indiana. So sometimes it's that making that connection with the individual is really key. Back to documentation. Figure out, it's kind of like this huge thing we have to deal with. What is the one thing we could do to get better that takes more time? And there's some exciting new software coming out on documentation and note taking. There are always new people coming up with better ideas on that, but it is something we're going to have to learn to live with. And sometimes people just want to be listened to and say, this is a big problem for us.
Absolutely, John. I mean, it was a conversation I had recently with a group of providers. The power of listening, and that so many of you are in this field for the right reasons. You want to help people, you want to support people. That's a good thing. But at times it does become a better double-edged sword where like somebody just wants you to listen and you try and go into fix-it mode or support mode, and they're not ready for that. They may not necessarily need that. It may not even be fixable, but they just want you to listen. They want to feel connected. They want to feel seen, heard, and understood. So it's tough to balance. But I'd encourage you with this. I know we've got a variety of people here on all different levels of the organization. So please don't think that if like you're not at the very top of the organization, that well, Scott, John, this was all nice in theory, but like I can't take ownership. I'm not the owner of this agency. I'm not at the top. You have influence. Like you can take ownership of your own little corner of the universe. You can have a profound impact as a frontline supervisor on the DSPs around you and that culture, as John was talking about. Like, don't wait. You don't need anybody's permission, to change some questions in how you interact and show appreciation for your staff. Change starts by taking ownership, not waiting for the perfect time.
And you'll try some things and they won't work. I tried to talk Dina out of this, but she is such a wonderful person. Everybody that turned their camera on today is going to get a $500 gift card from the Arc of Florida. Actually, I'm lying about that.
You see Vivian laughing. Vivian have to sign off on it.
But the idea that how do we cross this gap with people? A new employee, one of our agencies we worked with, they made a major change on orientation. And I'll just pick a couple of names here. Say Robin's the supervisor and Angela's the new staff. They made sure her new supervisor came in and had lunch with her during the week of orientation. And they didn't talk work. They just got to know each other and said, Angela, how many kids do you have? Where do you live? What part of the city are you in? Where'd you come here? How'd you come here? What did it? Here's how long I've been here. First time the supervisor said, this is a waste of time. I'm too busy to come downtown and talk to an individual person. What they discovered is it changed such a difference on how we could get that relationship started, that they knew each other, that they both went to a similar size high school and what that happened. It's all about relationship starting. And that, again, we love having conversations with folks. And I will just say this about Scott and his work. Respond back and you'll get all kinds of things that can help. And we'll talk about that, and the same with us here. You are incredibly gifted, committed people, and we thank you for that. And we'd love to have a conversation. If you want to talk more about ownership, want to talk about ideas, love to do that. You've got our contact information. Dino knows how to get in touch with us. Go back to that where you don't want to be stuck, and would love to help you get to that next level. Stay there and keep moving up, because it's good for the people we support. It's good for everybody's life. And at the end of the day, the reason you're here, I often ask people to think about the first person with a disability you ever worked with. Mine was a kid named Kevin, small state hospital in South Dakota. Kevin spent all day in a bed looking at a ceiling. I went to college to play football, so I knew nothing about disability policy. It was 1973. Beautiful day outside. Kevin never got out of his bed. So I grabbed Kevin up with a sheet, carried him outside. We sat in the grass. He giggled and laughed and dug his fingers in the grass. Tells you a little bit about the institution. It was 3 hours later before anybody ever noticed Kevin wasn't in his bed. And they came outside and found us. I got chewed out. I was a volunteer. What could they do? Fire me? Kevin was happier than he'd ever been feeling grass. Didn't put it in his mouth. They were scared of that. But he was moving around on the grass. I'll never forget Kevin. Kevin was 19 years old and weighed 65 pounds. Think about what that experience on the grass meant to him, instead of looking at a dirty white ceiling all day long, which is pretty much what his life was. So you all have stories to tell to people that'll be meaningful to others, because that's who you are and that's what brought you to this field. And I'll turn it back to Scott here, but we just thank you for giving a gift of an hour of your life today, and hope that you may want to talk a little bit more. If not, that's great too. So Scott, I'll let you close.
I think that's perfect closing, John. Can't possibly top that. So just echo what you said. Thanks so much. We appreciate all of you coming here today and the amazing work that you're doing. I'm happy to stick around for a few extra minutes if Tina wants to keep the room open and people want to ask any lingering questions in a smaller setting. But if not, thank you so much for being here today. Hope you have a phenomenal rest of your week.
Great. And again, as always, John and Scott, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us.
Our pleasure. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you.
Great.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Vivian.